Welcome to everyone as we launch a new year of the Catch, Lunch, and Learn series. I'm Susan Walsh, a member of the Lunch and Learn Committee, educator, and mom of two boys. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our topic and speaker. Everywhere I go, parents are talking about technology, social media, and their indecision on how to proceed with their kids. We are so excited about today's presentation, Raising Digital Natives, Ensuring Our Kids Use Tech Responsibly. With this information in hand, we as parents can make the best decisions for our children around tech usage. Allow me to introduce Brittany Sitar. Brittany is an addiction counselor and mental health educator. Before we jump into it, a question that came to us ahead of time from one of the parents. She shared that she was on vacation in Colorado this summer. And she said, I have a really serious question for you. How is it that my kids would rather look at their phones than the majestic Rocky Mountains? And Brittany, I think that you're going to be able to help us today with that, help us understand. We're just really looking forward to getting support with this information because it makes our community stronger when our families are strong. And I know there's so much to share. So Brittany, I will send it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay, so my name's Brittany. Today I am here to really just give you knowledge because knowledge is power. I really want to help parents and families navigate technology in the home and help them create an environment where technology is a tool and not a weapon. A lot of times parents get into a place where they're so far into this that it becomes scary, and it doesn't need to be a scary situation. We want to take a proactive approach and make parents feel empowered and engaged instead of disconnected from this subject. So we'll hop right in. So what's the big deal with social media and technology? This is what, as a professional, I've been in the field for 14 years now. And this is some of the things that we've seen, particularly since the pandemic, and also particularly in that middle school population. So we've seen an increase in suicide rates, along with all the mental health diagnoses, ADHD, depression, anxiety. But the biggest jump has been increased suicide rates. And that's, easily connected to bullying. We've seen increase in eating disorder and body dysmorphia due to body comparison. We've seen an increase of risky behavior, all those TikTok challenges that really put kids in a position to feel like they need to one-up each other on these challenges. And we know that the brain does not fully develop until we're in our mid-20s. So they're not thinking. The last thing to develop in your brain is that prefrontal cortex. And that's the decision-making, moral choice and really thinking things through part of the brain. And so risky behavior is part of, that growth and development. And when there's challenges on TikTok like that, it's really easy for kids to get caught up in that. We're seeing an increase of victims of crime due to online predators and grooming. And we're also seeing dysfunctional ideas of sex and dysfunctional ideas of what relationships are due to access to porn. The average age of a person seeing porn has moved to around 8 years old. And it's no longer the magazines under our parents' beds. It is a simple Google, because they heard some kid say something at school about it. So I want to remind you that the problem today is not with technology itself. It's our relationship with technology. So throughout this presentation, I want to empower you to reflect on what is your relationship with technology and what do you want your family values and your home to look like in regard to technology. A lot of times that when I talk about this outside of webinars, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So I find myself like talking to a lot of people about it. And there are a whole set of parents who come at me back with, who cares? I was bullied, and who cares? I had access to this stuff. And the goal here is not to remove access and create these perfect childhoods for our kids. The problem is the pace at which our kids are exposed to it. So if you take the pace at which they're exposed to this and the crucial part of brain development and put those things together, it's changing the trajectory of how they view the world, what they think about themselves, their foundation of trust, communication, all of those things during that crucial period of brain development, and their access to the things that influence that. So when I was bullied, funny enough, I was bullied for my voice. And it was on the bus ride home and the bus to school. So there was a 20-minute period where I had access to that bullying. And when I was at school around teachers, or when I came home and I was in my safe environment, I wasn't exposed to it. If I had a phone in my hand and I had access to social media and I took part in all these chat groups, I can promise you that the trajectory of my mental health would have been very different than that 20-minute exposure to the bullying on the bus. So let's move into social development. Throughout the rest of this presentation, I want you to keep in the back of your head that humans are wired since birth to seek approval. So we are constantly looking for that feedback loop from the minute that we enter this world. As an infant, we are looking for that feedback loop from our caregivers. So we're developing our sense of attachment to humans. We're looking for consistency, stability. We're learning about our body. We're trying to understand language. We're looking at things around us. And so if we have consistent caregivers, our caregivers consistently respond to our needs, we're going to have a more healthy attachment style. Moving into toddlerhood, we're exploring our identity. We're really establishing moral development. We're establishing the foundation of our relationships, and we're learning how to regulate our emotions. If any of you have or have had a 2 to 8 year old, you know that emotion regulation is not a natural thing that happens for children. It's something that we have to teach them. And we do that by healthy communication, by teaching them boundaries and having our own boundaries. We do that by giving them the tools to regulate their emotions. So we're talking about feelings. I can't tell you how many adult humans that I have worked with who, when they come to me for help, they don't know how to identify their feelings. So, a simple like, this is what sad feels like, this is fear, this is anxiety. All of those things they're very taboo in homes sometimes. And so being able to have those conversations with our kids and help them understand and put a name to what they're feeling and give them the tool to regulate that feeling or emotion is really going to establish going forward how they handle that. When we move into age 9 to 13, actually 9 and up, we're moving out of our main. So from infant to around 9 or 10, we are just an extension of our home environment. So you'll notice that, our toddlers are saying what we say, they're doing what we do, they're complete extensions of us. Once we move past that age, they're starting to explore a little bit more about their identities, who they are. They're taking what they learned about communication, what they learned about boundaries, what they learned about relationships, how to respond to things. They're taking all of those things that they learned and they're applying it in their peer friendships. And then they start taking their feedback loop that they're seeking is more along the lines of peers, cultural, social, educational experiences. They're really seeking privacy in this time and really understanding who and how that privacy is violated. So this age is a really crucial time for parents and children to establish what that looks like and have respect and trust. So I always encourage parents, the way we start to really establish a foundation of trust with your preteens is to reflect on your reactions to them. So the first time your kid comes to you and says, "Mommy, what's sex?" Right? The way you react to that will establish how they will feel about approaching uncomfortable subjects going forward. So their idea of trust is going to be solely based on how we react to them and how you discipline them for things that they have going on. So this is a crucial time in development, 9 to 13. And this is also a more common time for kids to start getting their first phones or getting access to social media. So if you're looking at that rapid pace of influence, instead of it just being their peers while they're at school, we're opening up a whole Pandora's box of things for them. So that feedback loop. Let's talk a little bit about the dopamine response. Dopamine is a chemical in the brain that gives pleasure. It's natural. So we release dopamine throughout our day for things that are pleasurable. So, for me, when I get up before my kids and I'm able to complete a whole cup of coffee, you better believe that my brain's excited and happy. And that feedback loop, it's going to say, do that again in the morning. And there are several things that will reinforce the dopamine response throughout your day and give you that, say, hey, let's do that again. That was pleasurable. That was enjoyable. Social media companies and any other email, Google, all of those things, they have designed their systems to target that feedback loop. So if you've ever had that ding on your phone, or even just looking at these icons, that is releasing dopamine. Like your instinct is to go check that and to look at it. It's going to be your kid's instinct too, especially for underdeveloped brain who can't really regulate that to begin with. But ultimately, if you've ever, I don't know, if you put in Google Cocomelon crazies, you'll see there's this like phenomenon where people think that Cocomelon has turned their toddlers into crazy people, because when you take Cocomelon away, they throw tantrums, they throw fits, and there's a sense of withdrawal from Cocomelon. And that's not necessarily, Cocomelon doing that. It's that dopamine response in the brain for kids and that screen. When you remove it without parameters, and we'll get a little bit into how you can start setting those parameters. But if you're not proactive about screen time and intentional about screen time, you're going to see those meltdowns. You're going to see the fits. You're going to see it's going to look different for each age group. But if we go back to that Colorado Rockies incident, this is exactly what's happening. So if you go on that road trip and you're like, hey, we're going to be doing a road trip to Colorado, and we're going to go through the Rockies, you guys can have 30 minutes of screen time on this entire road trip. You do it whenever you want, but it's 30 minutes. That is an example of setting parameters, having intentional screen time rather than just saying, here, we have a long road trip, take your tablet and do whatever you can do. Because they are not going to know when to stop, just like with anything. You can take your kid to the park and they're not going to ever say they want to go home. It's because we are in charge of that, not them. We are in charge of keeping that schedule, regulating those boundaries, and having that communication with them. So when you gave me that example, I thought it was kind of appropriate, just because that's exactly what's happening, is that they're really incapable of setting those boundaries themselves. Okay, so with this video, I really want to preface this by all of the things that we recently discussed. This is just a 3-minute clip of all of those things happening in real time. So you'll be able to see that dopamine feedback loop, the social pressure, all of the evolution of all of the issues that we're seeing in today's society, particularly with that middle school population.
And let's sit down and I will read you a book.
You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for, everything I need. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see?
Whew. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a minute because I'm sure that there's a little bit of tears going on here. I do want to mention that there is a very large population of males being impacted by this as well. That video only really hit on females. The likelihood of an eating disorder is a lot higher in females. Also suicide risk and depression, all of that tends to be higher in females. This is not just a female issue. The social media and all of these platforms that we have tend to impact that middle school population of girls a lot more. And gaming tends to be the issue. Gaming and porn seem to be the issue for males, though that is not to say that it is not cross, happening to both genders. So kudos to Dove because they have a big, promotion happening right now with that campaign. And they also changed that video. The first time I saw that video, they ended it with the hospital stay. And it was kind of like, what happened? So they added another 30 seconds there that really ties it all together. So let's talk a little bit about what really matters with technology. If you're in a position right now where you can be proactive about this, that's the most important thing. Not everybody is in that situation and they're trying to undo some of the things that have been done. And that's due to lack of knowledge, right? Knowledge is power. This is not something that we were given a handbook on when cell phones were released. It's the same exact concept when cigarettes were released. It was a free-for-all. 8-year-olds were smoking them. So at some point, somebody was like waving some flags saying, hey, this is not good. We cannot just throw these into kindergartners. We have to have some regulations on this. And they had to, as a society, start undoing some of those things. And the damage for that group of people was already done. And we're kind of in the midst of that. I don't think we're really going to see the depth of the damage until, the teenagers, preteens now, their adult generation, they're going to be the ones really driving the change and really saying, hey, this was not okay. So I think we're really in the infant stages of making change of this and creating some societal boundaries around technology and protecting our kids. Though it's gotten a lot better since the pandemic, for sure. Being proactive, establishing trust. So this is simply a conversation prior to giving them the device. Teach them how it's earned, teach them how it's lost. Like, I'm giving you this because I trust you. I'm letting you do this because I trust you. This is how I cannot trust you. These are the things that you could do that would break that trust, and I will have to not let you do that. So we're having those conversations from a very young age about what trust is and how it's earned and how it's lost. We're creating routines, rules on how screens are used. In my family, no screens at the dinner table, no screens behind closed doors, and we have time limits. So my kids are still very young, but that routine and those rules apply to me too. So my kids will call me out. If I have my phone sitting next to my dinner plate, they're 100% going to say, hey, Mom, put your phone away. And that is something that we're establishing now, because the minute I hand them a device, they're going to know, like, no, we're not, when we have family time, we have family time, and we're not going to be zoned out on our phones. Boundaries, we have time limits, contents, monitoring. So, for those who have adolescents or preteens, it's when will they know they have their screen time? It's, hey, you get home from school, these are the things that need to get done. Then you can have some screen time before dinner, or whatever that looks like for your family. There is no one right way, but you will know when it's problematic, and you will know when you have to revisit these things, and you have to say, okay, which of these things is missing and how can we improve? And sometimes that's seeking guidance from a counselor or from somebody, who would be able to coach you through that. And sometimes it's really just saying, what's going to work for my family here and how can we improve this? Communication. I cannot emphasize this enough. Discuss these issues with your kids. At the pace at which our kids are exposed to content, I would much rather my kids learn sensitive issues from me rather than them getting on Google, where any idea that you possibly have can be endorsed, whether it's right or wrong. So discuss these issues with your kids, answer the hard questions. When they come to you with something that's really uncomfortable or taboo, or like, monitor your facial expressions. And even if you need to take a minute, say, you know what, I really want to answer that question, but I want to answer it right. Let's research it together. Let's, let's wait till your dad gets home. Let's talk about that as a family, any of those things. But to make something seem forbidden, that's when kids will often start seeking consultation from the Googles. Last is intentional time. Make screen time intentional all the way through till they're moving out of your house off to college. We're having intentional time. That means we know what content we are and are not allowed to have. We have those content limits. So if it's a school night and I know I can only have 30 minutes or an hour of screen time, what is that screen time going to look like? Hey, get your chores done and you can look up sneakers on the internet, right? Because that's what my kid loves to do. Not my kid, but or you can, for my youngest, it's Cocomelon. And so it's like, hey, get all this done and you can have 10 minutes of Cocomelon. So there's a boundary, there's a routine, there's accountability there, and I'm communicating when that's going to end. Those are all, so these bullet points are all things that you can revisit when you start feeling a little bit out of control or you start seeing behavior issues that are connected with screen time. All right, helping our parents. It's highly encouraged to delay phone use until 13 or young, or encourage delay phone use or older, not younger. I don't know why it says older. I recognize that this is incredibly difficult. I recognize that kids are getting phones in 5th grade, and if you are delaying phone use past 8th grade, a lot of kids do feel like their social lives are being interfered with without a device. So again, this is going to be a family decision. There is no right or wrong, but just know when we're really taking to consider brain development, it is our job to put those boundaries in place, those parameters, and really understand the risk that you are giving by putting a device in their hand and really allowing them to have access to all the world around us. Model healthy tech use. So what you practice, what you preach, right? We are doing what we say we want our kids to do. Educate the parents, educate the kids of the risks, the content, the consequences. We're always having these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they feel taboo to, there's a lot of religious taboo that might make families hesitant to have these conversations. But this is going to really be the foundation of if your kid's going to return to you with some of those hard situations that they may end up in. Grooming, porn, bullying, body comparison, all of those things we want our kids to be able to feel comfortable coming to us about. If my kid got into a situation where she was groomed and ended up getting in a situation on some sort of chat or anything like that. I really would hope that she would come to me instead of me seeing a decline in her mental health and finding out after the fact. So establishing our ability to have conversations and have trust with our kids mutually is going to be the key to that.
Thank you, Brittany. That was so much good information. As the questions come in, I'm looking. Let's talk first. There's a lot about the when. When should this happen, or when should I let fill in the blank, right? So you talked a lot about the research behind it, which I think is so important. One of our audience members asked, when is the prefrontal cortex developed? And because you
not
mentioned
till after college.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh, geez, if you waited until then.
Right. And that's why when we're in college, we do all this stupid stuff, right? Because we don't really, we're young and free. But it's not even about waiting until it's developed. It's laying that foundation prior to doing it. So it's, establishing the trust really, and in my opinion, because of that crucial brain development period in that middle school years, fifth, sixth, and seventh grade, particularly, giving them access to social media, it feels so counterproductive to me. There's nothing really good that could come of it. And a lot of families that have the extreme view that I have on this are doing a joint social media account. So it's this is our account, it's on my phone, and we check it together and we have conversations. So we're talking about who you're following, and we're talking about reels that you might see, and saying, hey, what do you think about this post? She's half naked. Or what do you think about the comments on her body of this post? And so we're really having this conversation with them without it being directly them that's the target. So you can always go to like the Kardashians social media page, and there's a whole slew of conversation that can be had based on what they're posting, right? And talk about, like, do you think that's appropriate? How would you feel if somebody said that to you? How would you feel if you saw that on your friend's page? So you can start having this and doing these baby steps of exposure in those early years, so that there's a small chance that they'll start to comprehend the depth of what is happening. I had a really good friend who delayed all the way until the summer after 8th grade. And what that did for her was she saw her friends going through it. And so she was able to witness it and not be a victim of it. So by the time she got it, she was just kind of like, oh, I've seen this. Like, I know now. So, hindsight's 2020, right? So, she got all this exposure to it, and then she got the phone, and of course she had her own slew of things that happened, but we're setting them up for a little bit more than just blindsiding them with what could possibly go wrong.
Right. This seems to be where a lot of the questions are right now. There's this, that 9 to 13 is when kids are often getting started, getting their first phones and whatever. And the parent was saying, what if you waited until 13 or 14 so they can navigate social media and tech more safely? I think an argument to that is, if my kid doesn't have phone, Snapchat, whatever it might be, they're being excluded from social activity.
Yeah. And that's the biggest issue that we're seeing now, is it's not even friend groups that they're feeling excluded from. I come from Vegas, and the sports leagues for youth in Vegas, their main form of communication with players is through a social media platform.
Mm.
So if you want info on your games or your tournaments or your payments, you were kind of forced to be in this world of social media. So again, this is a society issue that has yet to be resolved. And it's really about us really infiltrating all these systems with education. And one by one, we all band together to be like, no, this is not, this is not an acceptable way for us to communicate. So, again, joint social media accounts, if you feel like that is really hindering their social ability. That is the number one thing that I hear from middle school parents is like, they're becoming more socially at risk by not giving it to them. And so I really want to encourage you to lay that foundation, have those conversations, have a really strict set of boundaries with, this is what me giving you the device looks like. This is what the rules are with it. This is what trust is with it. And these are the things that if I see happening, they will not be a part of our household anymore. Like, this is a privilege, not a right. And these are the parameters on it. A lot of kids who are getting it in elementary school, it's, well, I want to be able to communicate with my kid when they're not, here. And fine, if that's your case, then what's the point of them having the phone after school, right? So we're going back to our original purpose of the phone. My original purpose of the phone was so that I could access you when you were outside of my house. When you get home, the phone gets put away. We don't need to be, engaging in all of that 24/7. So there is not a cookie cutter way for this to be rolled out. It should be something that everybody in the household, we have a discussion prior to, and we talk about these things. And if I'm going to give this to you in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, we're having the conversation of what it looks like, the parameters around it, and my right to be able to explore what's happening on that device at all times. I keep getting the chats popped up. Sorry, I'm getting distracted.
Oh, that's okay. So let's take a step back from that. So what I'm hearing you say, you're talking a lot about the boundaries and this is how we're going to do it. But one of those big pieces that we talked about earlier was the communication. And I know I can only speak personally. This summer I had my children bored a couple of times during the summer. Mom, I'm bored. I'm sure we can all relate to that. And I just did a quick Google search and I said, here's all the research on how good it is for you to feel bored. Have fun with it. Aren't you glad I'm trying hard to be a good mom? But so I feel there is a level of sharing and educating that we can do. So some of the questions coming through are, what are the best resources to do that? And going to the Dove campaign, which is pretty intense, at one point, might that be good to share with a child, or is it good to share with a child?
Again, this is going to be personal preference. For me, it will be something that I share with my kid when the time is right. When all those issues start popping up, it will be something that I pull up someone's social media account. Currently, I have a almost 7-year-old, and as every 7-year-old in today's world wants to be, is a YouTube star, right? We don't even allow YouTube really in our house. So where she got that is beyond me. It's, we don't have control over what they're really going to be exposed to, but we can educate them. And her biggest question to me every single day, Mom, why can't I have a YouTube account? Mom, why can't I post my videos on YouTube? She makes videos and does reviews of whatever. I don't even know. You should see the data on my phone. It's completely full. And I won't let her put them on the internet. And so for me, because that issue is so pushed, I've already started having those conversations. And I've already said, like, people are mean. And I don't want you to be exposed to that. Like, if I put you on the internet, there's not very nice things. And she's currently obsessed with JoJo Siwa. So I pulled up JoJo Siwa's, accounts, and I read some comments. I'm like, look, JoJo Siwa was your favorite person in the world, and there's people saying all these things about her. Like, I don't think that is a healthy way for a 7-year-old to live her life. And so it's really going to be personal preference. And when your gut tells you that it's right and time was right to have this conversation, you go with it, and so there is no, there's no cookie cutter. It's really based on your family values, your family unit, how much you want to, have these open conversations and expose it. And you're going to mess up. Like, we never do things perfectly. And you might end up doing something where you're like, oh, that's not something I should have done. But we don't know, right? Like, this is all just trial and error. And so, I try to cling on to people who have kids in this age group right now, right? I ask all the questions like, how are you handling this? What's going on? Because I'm going to need that info in about 10 years. No, less than that, in about 6 years. So, I think that being able to share this info with my kids rather than them getting it firsthand from experience or from whatever they Google on the internet and find info on, I would much prefer it to be me.
So, Brittany, what advice do you have when your child feels not having a social media platform like TikTok, let's say, is impacting their mental health? Like, they are being excluded, that they are showing signs of depression because of it. What would you say? What are some talking points that you might recommend?
So I think that, if this is something that is really concerning mental health wise for your kid, that's when you start looking at, okay, this is the time to talk about it, right? This is the time to say, what do you want? In an ideal world, because what would you say that age is? 11, 12? I would assume it's probably like 6th or 7th grade that's happening.
I bet it's, to be honest, I mean, I have 2 boys.
Yes.
But,
okay. Somebody said yes.
Okay. I have the questions on instead of the chat.
Yeah.
On a different doc, but I even know like 2nd, 3rd, especially with TikTok, for instance, when all the dances were a big thing, it could be any age.
Yeah. For me personally, elementary school, it's a no-brainer. It's like, sorry, it's not happening. There's really no reason for it to happen. I have seen firsthand what you're speaking of in regard to the mental health and the disconnect that people feel. And I actually have a nephew. My sister-in-law is very extreme with it, and they have a split family. She was very strict about it. Dad was not in regard to gaming. And she had found that when he was at Dad's, his mental health actually had improved because he felt connected in those, they were like chat rooms or whatever. So, I think that the most important piece here that we're talking about is really, if we're going to hand that device over and make the decision, okay, I think as your mom or as your dad, that this is setting you back and we're ready for this, really have a plan on how you're going to roll that out. And that's going to be, these are the rules, these are the parameters, this is the time limit, these are the apps or whatever I'm going to put on it to monitor your content, and this is how you lose it, right? So kids really operate well on those parameters and it being black and white. Like, if I see these things, this is how it goes away. I need to be able to trust you with it and roll it out in really small doses. Like, here's the device. First it's shared and we're talking about this and we're having conversations and I'm monitoring the content you're putting out and the comments that you're saying. And then slowly, we're cutting that umbilical cord and allowing them to get more independence on that. But we have training wheels at first, just like with everything.
So along those lines, we've heard the communication, the positive modeling, all of these things. Ultimately, families are very busy. You're working, you're going to activities, you have a lot going on. A lot of parents have asked about apps and certain securities that you can have. I know you're not here to promote any specific apps, but I think parents are curious as to what is out there to help safeguard. I know when I was a teacher, I was lucky enough I could look at all 25 of the iPads on my iPad at one time. And if anything was awry, I could tap it and it would go, Mrs. Walsh has turned off your access. I mean, it was the most magical power ever. I think parents are wondering, is there a little bit of a magical power that they can add to help them in this?
Yeah, so there's several products out there that help with that. There's also, I've, done parent coaching on this subject for quite some time now. And I've had a handful of parent coaches or clients who have been like, yeah, my kids get around those apps. Like, it doesn't matter. So it really kind of depends. But there is one site that I will throw out there just because that one site will give you kind of a non-biased view of apps, which my mind was blown at the amount of info on this website. It's called Protect Young Eyes. And it's a guy out of the East Coast who, does similar work that I do, but his website, you can go to his website and you can look at, like, here's the Instagram app. This is the risk. And these are the things that are happening. And this is what we want, the petition we want signed to protect our kids for Instagram or whatever. He is next level when it comes to knowing the latest apps, knowing the problems with them that our kids are having, and really giving the down low on it. And then, he's going to endorse several products that help put parameters in place. I know Apple has lots of things in place where you can set time limits, you can turn apps off. I don't have Apple, I'm not an Apple person, but I can tell you that I've considered switching for that very reason, but I'm not there yet, so I don't have to address it. But I think that starting at that website and really exploring the resources he has on that page would be helpful.
And it's interesting, you mentioned that some don't work or kids find a workaround. And I think that's one of the challenges with technology is it's quickly moving. So the minute we think we have the secure situation, there's a troubleshoot out there on YouTube or a workaround, I should say. That's why if we go back to those foundations, we lay with our kids ahead of time, hopefully that helps to lead the way. A parent asked, what would you recommend a parent should or shouldn't do if they find out their child is being bullied on social media?
So once you get to the middle school age, it's really important to first consult your kid, right? This is going to be where that foundation of trust is. It's like, I trust your opinion on this. What do you think we should do, right? And see what their baseline is on solving that problem. How can I help you with this? And then you're giving them your opinion. I can tell you, like, what I want to do are these things. Let's find a middle ground here on what's going to work for you and what's going to work for Mama Bear here. Because our instinct is going to be go to the schools. I do know that there are schools, and I'm sure there's plenty of school people in this, but I think that reporting it to schools does something. I'm not quite sure, but I think that that's one thing that can be done is reporting any bullying or harassment to school administration. And then really having that conversation with your kid, like, let's find a middle ground that's an appropriate solution here. Because one thing you don't want to do is to solve that problem for them without their permission in a way that they don't find acceptable. That's going to really hinder that trust process in whether or not they're going to come to you with that info next time.
Another one, are there current recommendations for how much intentional screen time that they should have? I know you use that phrase, intentional screen time.
So actually, research shows they did a research study out of Salt Lake with a handful of, I think it was like 300 or 400 people, and it actually showed that kids with social media that were actively doing intentional content had less symptoms of anxiety and depression than kids who were passively on social media. So the kids who were just scrolling and looking through social media and comparing themselves and finding what they don't have and what they need and all those things that we just do when we scroll, those kids had higher symptoms of anxiety and depression than the kids who were intentional with it. So it's not necessarily about time limit, which there will always be a time limit, in my opinion, because my kids, I think, will always have meltdowns when I take it away. So and they always need that end, right? That's part of the parameter. It's not even about you can't have it for 5 hours. It's, we're a family unit. We have family time. We have chores. We have dinner. Like, this is your allotted time for that. On the weekends, it's a little bit more relaxed, right? It's just like us. So for Sunday morning cartoons, they just look different. And so it's less about like, you can have this much screen time, but it's Saturday morning. Like, we had our pancakes and you want some screen time, go ahead. But you better believe I'm going to come sit next to you in about 30 minutes and come be like, what are you watching? What are you looking at? No screens behind closed doors. No, we're not getting on. When I say you're not allowed on YouTube, I better not walk by and see you on YouTube. And so those are some of the things that, as a family, you need to come up with what that looks like. I had a family once who, her daughter loved to read and she was a reader, and they gave her a Kindle, and she was like, well, what about, my kid who loves to read and she reads before bed and that's behind closed doors and she has a Kindle. And I was like, well, just why can't you turn the internet off? Like that, she doesn't need the internet to read her book. She can have the device in her room. It's not the screen itself that's causing the problem. It's the pace at which we're getting exposed to some of this stuff. And it's up to us to put those parameters in place for them.
Right. So what advice would you give to a parent who didn't set the rules up or status check-ins and all that ahead of time, and now is feeling a little bit stuck in the current situation? What would you advise for a reset without, trying to get some buy-in from the child and not being so resistant?
So in those situations, you need to identify if it's problematic. So is this use problematic to a place where you need to seek a professional? Some of the signs of problematic use are isolation, anxiety and depression, and any kid who is skipping school, it may not be because of technology, but any kid who's skipping school, that is a big sign of, like, you need to seek a professional and figure out what's going on. And a lot of times it is tied to something happening on social media or in chat rooms or gaming or any of, substance use, any of those things. But so identifying first if this is a problem that needs a professional for, and if not, and you just want a healthier home setting, we're starting really small with the basics. So I always encourage families to go back to the original intention of the device. Why did we give it to them in the first place? And so we kind of back up to that reason, and then we modify what that looks like for the kids. So always starting with dinner table behind closed doors and intentional time, right? So, and that's you too. So we don't sleep with our phones in our bedroom. Phones stay downstairs. They get plugged in before dinner. We don't, unless you're my husband. But it's something that we really try to establish now. And that's something that's super simple and super easy for parents who are way beyond pulling the device and taking things away, because that's the last thing you want to do as well, because you're going to experience a lot of pushback, a lot of behavioral issues with that, and some withdrawal. Like there's kids who, the streaks on Snapchat, kids who have literally become suicidal because their parents have taken their device and they've lost their streak, right? And they had a streak, and it's a big deal. I don't know. I don't have Snapchat, so I wouldn't know. But so we're really intentionally thinking this through, and we're having the discussion first as a family. Hey, I want to start having better boundaries as a family with tech, and this is currently what I'm seeing. And these are some of the things that I want to start putting in place as a family. And where we're starting really small. Because if you all of a sudden just rip the rug and, ruffle up everything, there's going to be some issues for sure.
Well, when we talk about modeling, which you just mentioned, I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, I use it to do carpools, check in when my kids need a ride. I do my grocery shopping on it. I do my clothes shopping on it. I work on it.
Yep.
It's just such a part of our lives that, how do we model when the reality is that's how we're functioning?
So we communicate. When my phone's in my face because it's 8:00 in the morning and I'm at work and my kids are still getting ready for school and they're like, mommy, I'm communicating that, hey, I got to check my email. I got to respond to this real quick. And I'm communicating that this is intentional use and I'm on the clock and I got to do this. And asking their permission when you're going outside of those parameters. If the phone rings, like my husband will sometimes take a work call during dinner and he'll always preface it, hey, I might get a call during dinner and I might need to get that. Or whatever that looks like is when there's got to be an exception, we communicate that with our kids, because they're going to do that to you, right? And they're going to call you out. If that's a family deal, they're going to call you out. Like, mom, get off your phone. Sorry, I'm putting it in Google Maps. I got to see how far this place is. And, and they will understand. So really, we're over communicating our activity on it and prefacing any rules that we might be breaking with, hey, I might need to keep my phone here because of A, B, and C.
Okay. A parent asks, what about hidden accounts? A lot of kids so if you monitor their accounts and you sit down with them and you're having the kumbaya moment around the app, and then they have a hidden account. Obviously you must eventually find it to know that they have one, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that goes back to, being that proactive, establishing this is what it means to lose trust. And if this happens, these will be the consequences. And we're following through with that consequence. If you haven't laid that foundation and you're too far into this and you found the hidden account, then we're just transparent about that and say, hey, I've noticed this. I want to have a conversation about it. And I'm disappointed that this is what's going on. Why did you hide it? What are some of the things you're doing on it? And laying that foundation right away, immediately going forward. Like, this isn't okay. And these are my rules. And, I need to see this from you. And this will be the consequence. And so we're establishing it right then and there if we haven't done that prior. But again, if that's happening, there's a few reasons that could be happening, from on a spectrum of like no reason at all. They just want some privacy to there's something going on. And so I would certainly be digging a little bit more to make sure that there's no grooming or predators or relationships that you're, uncertain of, because those are some signs of risky behavior. If you haven't established that trust and their ability to come to you, then they won't, and you'll see a decline pretty quickly.
All right. It looks like we have time for one more question, even though there are still a few that we didn't get to, and I do apologize for that. This one, my son wants to listen to music all the time. The parent thinks it's really distracting, and he's very resistant to a change. Can you speak to that kind of digital use?
So distracting to what, right? So we're talking about boundaries and parameters here. And it's when it's intentional family time, we're engaged and we're connected, right? So we're still putting those parameters. If it's music and you guys are doing chores or doing whatever, and you don't think it's gonna no harm, no foul, then it's, it's a family decision to say, go for it. But if you feel like it's intruding in connection with family, then it'll be up to you to set those boundaries on when there's connection with family. There's no earbuds in your ears, right? We're playing a game, or maybe you start with one, you have one and you're engaged. And these are the things that I need to see from you. If there's music in your ears, if you can't do that, then you got to take the earbuds out. So there's a fine line between putting these rules in place frivolously and without purpose, and doing it intentionally because you're seeing problematic things as a result of it.
Well, great. Well, Brittany, you've given us so much information, and thank you for answering all of our questions. I thank you so much. Everything will be shared. We'll be posting the presentation on YouTube, where you can also see the slides and also see numerous past presentations that are fantastic as well. Brittany, I have enjoyed meeting you, getting to know you, and appreciated the dialogue that we've shared both on and off screen.
Yeah,
Thank
likewise.
you so much. And before we go, I just want to share that Catch is co-sponsoring an event, How to Talk to Children About Scary Things. It will be Wednesday, September 20th at 7 p.m. Please check out, not to bring up social media, but follow us at Catch and get all of that information. I hope you can take advantage of that wonderful opportunity. I thank Brittany and everyone who joined us today, and I'm so grateful for another Lunch and Learn year off to a great start. Thanks so much, everyone.